Hi, I'm Sarah Bader. You may know me from my podcast with host Peter Bell, Sons of Patriarchy, or from my work with Sarah Stankorb, where I was featured in her article for Vice and her book, Disobedient Women. Today, I'd like to welcome you to this space, They Called Her Bitter, with my friend and co-host Margaret Bronson of Deconstruction Doulas, and as seen in the Situation Room with Pamela Brown on CNN. They Called Her Bitter explores stories that often go untold, stories shaped by grief, endurance, and the cost of telling the truth. This space aims to offer language, validation, and perspective for those untangling from coercive belief systems and structures. Sometimes it's just Margaret and I, sometimes we'll have a guest join, but our goal stays the same. Arm all those who love people still in the cult, or love people in their community adjacent to the cult, with all the information and resources to be able to join our army. So it's not just us three idiots out there swinging our swords at the dragon. You're welcome in this space. So we're back to They Called Her Bitter, and last time we left off, we got really excited about talking about what a cult is and defining it. So we thought we would just kind of round out that conversation and discuss a little bit, now that we've given some framework to what a cult is, what does that mean in the deconstruction world, and what does it mean for our work specifically?
Yeah. So this is if I am almost an expert on anything and they say like it takes however many hours to become an expert on something, this is my thing. Like everything else, I try. This is my thing. Okay?
Nice.
Right
I'm
here.
excited to
Cult
hear.
deprogramming is my everything. And I think the biggest thing that I see people get wrong is that they think that it is that we're just dealing with like facts, like statements about reality. Like, is the doctrine of hell true or not? Like, is eternal conscious torment true or not? Is the Bible supposed to be interpreted literally? Yes, no, right? Like those kinds of things. And if we were dealing with just bad theology, that would be enough. And so for some people, that is enough because, they were in a church or in a system that it genuinely was just like, oops, we got some things wrong and we need to like take a look at them again. But again, if we're moving over into the cult space and we talked about what that is, and so each person can kind of like creatively and empathetically listen to that episode and decide if their particular experience or aspects of their particular experience fall under the cult umbrella. And even within that, there is a spectrum of experience. There's people who came into it as adults, and there's people who came into it as teenagers. But like the younger and younger you come into it, that's going to affect what I'm about to say. So the younger that you're brought into this, the even more so what I'm about to say is true. So it is a nervous system wound less than it is an intellectual wound. The intellectual part has to be addressed eventually, but it is impossible to address it until you address the nervous system wound. If you try to address the intellectual part before you address the nervous system wound, for people who were in the cult, and more so the younger you were in that cult or how extreme the control of that cult was on you, the more that when we talk about the facts is actually going to send us deeper into the cult, seeking safety in the cult. And it will not actually serve the purpose of the person who's, bringing the facts and trying to like ask good questions to get the people out. Yeah.
Maybe off record, I want to tell you something. I was talking with someone last night, and I was talking about our dynamic. Because she was talking about how it's really interesting to see an atheist and a Christian work together. And she thought it was really interesting that you asked me, and we probably should address this again, of how many of my friends are Christians and how many of your friends are atheists, and just that difference.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I told her was, everything I do by accident and by gut instinct is what you're able to do and articulate. So hats off, first of all. I really feel like I'm actually getting to experience and frame my journey under your expertise, to be honest. So you may not like think of yourself as an expert, but I feel like every time I talk to you, I've learned something new. I've reframed something I've gone through. And it's just really interesting to listen to you talk about things and realize that's exactly, I think, by accident, part of maybe the capacity of being an atheist helps me do this, where I know that discussing a fact with someone that I'm trying to reach is not going to help them. They think the world is flat. I think the world is round. If I tell them the world is round, they're going to shut down immediately. But if we explore it together, it's an entirely different thing. And so I love that you're able to actually articulate why and how and explain that to people, because it's something I just do. And I think that's the advantage of being an atheist. It comes more innately. I don't need to argue the facts. I don't care. And I know how many rhetoric classes these jerks took. No amount of arguing with them is ever going to reach them. But I also know that compassion and listening and stopping and pausing and constantly, well, have you thought that through? Or challenging that narrative. Like, I think the biggest one I get is, oh, you're an atheist. You don't even have morals. Why do you care? That kind of thing. How do you frame morality when you're an atheist is the biggest question I get. And to me, it just doesn't matter. The facts do not matter. It is what you do with them. It is the compassion. And so it's just really interesting to me to watch you frame in what comes to me naturally with expert advice. It's just so interesting. And you should give
Yeah.
yourself more credit.
It's hard because it's all self-taught. I mean, it's not
Right.
self-taught. I've been reading experts. It's just nothing came with a certificate. Nothing
Yeah.
was official. But like I have been, studying and reading, and part of it, so, everyone's deconstruction is going to be commensurate to their indoctrination. And so for me, my indoctrination was extremely broad. Like I studied every subject through a Christian nationalist lens, right?
Yeah. Right.
And also, my indoctrination was very deep. Like, I am autistic and I hyper focused and like studied all the way down to the bottom of a very broad range of topics. And so that means that my deconstruction has to be equally broad and deep. Whereas the kids who went to Sunday school and didn't pay attention and were daydreaming, right? I have a hope chest filled with notebooks, filled with notes, because I felt like every single thing people said, I thought it was true, and I was trying to remember all of it and then try to see how it fit together, and then that's where it starts to fall apart. But because of that, my deconstruction was also ministry philosophy. And so like a huge part of my deconstruction has been, how do I, as someone who wants to help people, actually help people and not hurt people? Because the way I was trained to minister was actually harmful. So I have to actually like deconstruct how one person exerts persuasion or influence over another in a healthy way that's respectful. So you know what I'm saying? It's just, not everyone has to like go as deep and as broad, but I think that in order to truly deprogram yourself, it has to be commensurate. So like, you checked out early, right? You were like, this stuff's BS.
Yeah.
And so like, it was not important for you to learn all of the how, when, where, why, what, because you got to work really early helping people get out. And you've been doing that. And that's all it took for you to be successful in that. But I think on the back end, it's helpful to then also, pick up some of the other things along the way and know why what you're doing is working.
Yeah. Like I can't relate a lot to, I mean, I can empathize with women that have a lot of children and not struggle, but it's not something that I personally experienced. A lot of the childhood stuff, all the childhood stuff, definitely experienced that. Um, but
One
as an
of the
adult,
hardest things for me was choosing to stop having children. Like
I can only imagine.
it felt like dying. It felt like my life was over. It felt like I had no purpose left, even though I had 4 children to raise and I was drowning and I had no community, no support, and a sick husband. Like, there was no way. Like, it just literally like was not even conceivable for me to have another child. My body was falling apart. And still, it was the hardest decision to make. Again, this is nervous system wounds. Yeah. Up here in my upstairs brain, I knew the obvious choice was to not have any more children. Yeah. Obviously, because I wouldn't be able to serve the ones I already did have and already do love. But yeah, like, this is where I get so tired of people who are like, here's my 10 steps to deconstruction, or here's like the right path to deconstruct. It's like, no, it's so personal. It's each person's individual journey, genuinely, because first of all, every sect has slightly different flavors. That's why I feel like it's important for me to speak, because there's so few people speaking specifically to this niche demographic, which is less niche every day. Yeah.
I really do think that what you're bringing expert advice to is just my lived experience. And it's what I think an atheist does is that gut instinct, that gut response. And with informed by occult upbringing. So like you were saying, the left, they just cannot understand. I think one of the best examples I have is our Grace Agenda event, which you weren't able to come to, but Peter came to Moscow, so did Sarah Stancorb, and we had a open Q&A, open mic at the end, and we didn't moderate. So we had a lot of a variety of people that spoke, and one of the ladies at the end actually got up and said, I think maybe 1 or 2 sentences in, she was really nervous, very sweet. She said, I voted for Trump. And you're talking to a room where there was a coven there. There were, I mean, it was actually very well mixed. We had plenty of Christians, plenty of atheists, but you could have heard a pin drop. And I think I looked at Peter. I think he probably could spot me through the stage lights. I was holding Helen, like probably squeezed her a little bit too tight, and thought, oh my Lord, here it is. We are done. We're going to lose our entire crowd. And not a single person made a noise, because she said, I voted for Trump on these policies or whatever. And I'm paraphrasing because it was a long time ago. But I see the problems and I want to be included with you. Where do I fit in? And like you said, the left and the right do not have tolerance for that nuance. Yeah. And I can see so much gray having been in both sides. But what I don't have is the framework, and you're giving the framework and the language. What I've just been doing instinctively, you're able to actually define and say why this is happening, why this is important. I've always known that just approaching people with the facts is going to get, I went to Logos. We did rhetoric all the time. I think we were state champions for debate.
Yep. I was in NCFCA, National Christian Forensics and Debate League.
It was constant. So I know that arguing with them about facts is not going to get anywhere, but it's that compassion that I see, I understand, and I've felt that too, that really, really challenges them far more than facts do.
And it's startling to them because they haven't been treated like a human and had that like true human connection. Someone being like, what do you think? What do you feel? It's like, whoa, I don't know if anyone's ever asked me that. I don't know if I've ever asked myself that. And so then they're like, well, I don't know. Wait, why is it when I turn to look at what I think and feel, there's no information? Why am I not even recording the information of what I think and feel? There's nothing here. It's blank. Or there's a whole bunch of stuff there, but it's actually not my thoughts and feelings. They feel like my thoughts and feelings, but they're actually someone else's. One of the things I've said for years is I have a little cult leader that lives in my head. And if I can't learn to identify his voice, and it sounds a lot like Doug's.
Sorry.
Yeah. There's like a couple of them, and one is definitely Doug. He doesn't have to be in the room. I don't have to be with people who like him. He comes with me everywhere I go. And if I'm not being careful, I think his voice is my voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So, like, when my kid is sick, this was years ago, my kid is sick and I really need to get them medication, right? Somebody else is in my head telling me that's bad. CPS is going to come. I don't actually think that.
Yeah.
That's not coming from me. I think it's my own intuition.
I think I stopped having panic attacks about seeing a police officer.
Oh my gosh,
maybe only 11 or 12 years ago.
I still struggle with it.
I have to pull over, or I did. I don't anymore, but I had to pull over. I lost all respect for the local police officers. That helped a lot. But we have some cult members in the police force. And it just causes problems. But yeah, I mean, it started off as a young age of, if the cops ever come, run, hide. You don't know anything. Get inside the house. I mean, I can remember some really kind of nearly Ruby Ridge situations, and of course, we're right outside of Ruby Ridge. I mean, we're just 2 hours away from that whole situation. So
I think that's the thing that's kind of confusing about our niche experience is we were raised to view the government as bad, police office, like law enforcement, as bad. We were so anarchist. They called it libertarian, but it was like religious anarchy, right? Republicans were bad.
Yeah.
And evangelicals were bad. And now, because of the religious colonization that we talked about in the previous episode, and we're going to talk about more later, like each of those things has been colonized to become a weapon of Christian nationalism. And so now those things are like good and safe and like we're supposed to never question them, blah, 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 blah. It's like so confusing. This was the whole Trump of it all, right? Like when the Doug Wilsons of the world started voting for Trump instead of like Peruka.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, he held the Bible upside down. I thought, okay, well, surely the Christians will be mad. No. I was like, he's not even a Christian.
He's been divorced. He like commits adultery all the time. He says terrible things. I thought all of those things were going to be deal breakers because they always had been before.
Well, and like, let's look at Hegseth. Multiple affairs, alcoholic, useless as a military person. I've seen those pull-ups, and
he's a Fox News commentator. This is ridiculous.
He can do his makeup better than he can do a pull-up. Let's just be honest here. So it is that weird. Now we're worshiping that, you know, or not us, but now that is the current flavor of the cult, is just literally outside of Moscow. We have Charlie Kirk, gigantic Charlie Kirk and Doug Wilson poster, and they were making fun of him. They were making fun of him before he got shot. They thought he was useless and too soft and too woke, and or whatever other reasons they had problems with him. They would have a problem with Hegseth and his behavior out loud, but you put him in power, and all of a sudden
we just becomes a resource.
So what's making people just swallow this? Is it just that thinking process, or is it because it's coming from the top down and they're just rewriting their programming?
Okay, so first of all, I think you've got a couple of things, and one is just as much as the internet broke some of that isolation for us and allowed us to ask questions and start to listen to other voices, at the same time, the cult has gained a lot of airtime from a lot of different places. So, like we kind of talked about before, there's so many pipelines. You're a gym rat. There's a pipeline there into it, right? You're into homesteading, pipeline. Tradwife, pipeline. Homeschooling, pipeline. Christian school, pipeline. There's all these different pipelines. And like, the thing is, every single pipeline has a lot of good in it, right? Like, I want a slower way of life. I would love to bake bread every day. You know what I mean? Like,
I wanted to be a wildflower farmer.
I want to be a homesteader. I want to restore prairie. I want to bring back native, pollinators and plants, and, use medicinals and
I
forage.
won't even dress in, as feminine leaning anymore, because I don't want to look like I'm a tradwife.
Yeah.
It's sad because I do like some of those things.
Yeah.
but they've really ruined it.
Right. Right. And I think that's one of my things is like, I don't want us to throw those babies out with the bathwater either. Right? Like, I think getting back to the land is about the leftist thing you can do, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think not relying on corporations is about as leftist as it gets, right? Like, there's these different things. And what I'm afraid is that we're just going to do this like very honestly stupid pendulum swing and throw out a lot of the things that the cult was right about, and that's how they got people in, and then they lied to them. But the things that they used to get people in, the government is not your friend. That's kind of true, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. None of us feel like we are on the Epstein level of the government here.
Yeah, the government's not looking out for your interests, right? Media lies. Yeah. Right? It is a rat race. Corporate America, consumerism, bad, right? It's actually a lot of extremely leftist ideas that brought people into the cult and was what resonated with people. But by the time they realized, well, actually, I don't think they ever realized that they weren't actually someplace that was giving them freedom, that was caring about them, that was giving them their voice, the things that they were looking for, it was too late. And now their finances, their housing, their support system are dependent on them believing these things that actually go against the things that they joined the organization, the cult, the religious group, the political group, or whatever for in the first place. Because part of the whole thing, okay, I'm gonna try to say this. Part of the thing is that there's the facts that they say. I'm calling them facts. I'm not saying they're true. They put them forward as facts. But then there's the facts underneath that they're actually communicating, the things they never say out loud, but are the obvious inference of everything they're saying up here. I'm going to give some examples. But before I get to that, you have so many different flavors, right? You have the people who can't, the women who can't wear skirts. And then you have people who agree pretty much with everything with them, except they do wear skirts, or they do work outside the home versus not, or their kids are in Christian school versus only homeschool, right? Like all these different things. But all of those sects, they might disagree with the facts on the level, but the stuff under the surface, the facts under the facts, the stuff they don't say, that's what they all agree with. That is the connective tissue between all of these different factions, for whether it's an extreme Mormon group or Catholic group or Orthodox Jew or, Christian nationalist of all the different flavors, whether it's the Charlie Kirk flavor or the Doug Wilson flavor or the Dale Partridge flavor or whatever it is. It's those things underneath that are the things that make up what Christian nationalism is, what Project 2025 is, what this administration is. And here are a few of them. So the first one is that without God, humans are bad and must be controlled. Humans, right? So like, think of the illustration in the Bible of the shepherd and the sheep, right? You talk to any actual shepherd. Well, before I get to that. So the illustration, the shepherd and the sheep. What they will say is that if you have a sheep that wanders too much or is too slow or gets injured too much, what happens is the shepherd will break the sheep's legs and basically carry them around so that they can't harm themselves. And so what they mean by that is essentially you need to be controlled and you need to be limited and you need to basically submit to a bunch of external limitations so that you don't destroy yourself. But if you talk to any actual shepherd who's ever actually taken care of sheep, they're like, that's insane. That's a great way to kill a sheep. If a sheep can't walk, they're dead. Right? What a shepherd, like the way sheep and shepherds actually work is that there is a trust that is built up between the flock and the shepherd. And the shepherd earns the flock's trust by feeding them good food and keeping them safe and fending off attacks from wild animals and giving them medicine when they need it and talking to them gently and calmly, right? It's not control, it's trust. It's earned trust, right? And so at the very bottom of Christian nationalism is this idea that humans are bad. You can call it worm theology. So then the second thing is that God is angry at humans, right? Like humans in general, all destined to hell. And we are just lucky we get to breathe, that we get to live this little life. And, you know, the whole Calvinist thing of people being like, it's so awful that God would send people to hell. And they're like, well, the fact that he saves anyone makes him a good God, because everyone should go to hell, right? This is fun to talk about with an atheist. Sorry, I hope I'm not triggering you.
I mean, no, I'm just kind of like, well, that is awful, but okay.
Yeah, but
that people would buy into that. That's just so sad it's sad that I bought into that.
Right. Well, and you can see how if you so they don't say all humans are bad and they need God to control them. They don't say that out loud. But everything about racism, sexism, being against welfare, being against immigration is all built on this belief.
Especially the welfare issue. That really makes me sad, I think. I don't understand, and I know the system isn't perfect, but I guess coming from kind of my family on one side was old school socialists in Detroit back when they emigrated here. And it was just so much more like what I would imagine Christianity to be. It was neighborhoods, and every week they had a giant potluck and they fed everybody and they took care of each other, and the family units all lived within walking distance of each other. And if someone didn't have a family unit, they had one kind of assigned to them to care for them. And to me, that always looked like what Christianity is, or should be. And what Christianity is today is just hating those people, hating anyone that doesn't have the means. And I don't know about you, but have you looked at how expensive healthy food is?
Oh my gosh.
Just to bring up one
we're
tiny
literally
little
on
aspect.
Food stamps. Well, my family is on food stamps.
And you would be criticized for that. Or in Idaho, they've been passing new laws where you can't get, is it Idaho or is it federal? But it's at the very least Idaho, where you cannot get anything sugary or unhealthy, I believe, if you have food stamps. But I try to buy healthy food, and it's so expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And they're literally taking and just shoving people who are already down further. You're not worthy.
Or criminalizing homelessness. Homelessness exists. It is a symptom of bad leadership. It is not an individual choice or reality. It is a symptom of bad leadership. And then we blame them and punish them and now criminalize them for bad leadership that they had nothing to do with.
Well, and if we basically learned anything from the last two major recessions and issues, that the middle classes are the ones that are homeless.
Yeah.
It's not just people who have a drug addiction problem. It is,
right.
It's families.
Yes. There are so many kids who are in the foster care system because their parents are on the street because they can't afford housing. Yeah. I mean, we can talk about, we could probably do a whole episode just on that topic.
Tie that in with empathy right there.
Yeah.
No empathy.
Okay, here's another one. This one goes deep, okay? This is the idea. Ready? It might take a while for you to understand what I'm saying. Humans don't learn. That's the idea, okay? So the idea is that society is always getting worse, that our wars are constantly getting worse, that our realities are getting worse, and that humans don't learn. That's not true. We are learning. Look at the millennials, okay? Look at how much we've learned. We are like, no, I can look at, the pattern of history, this cycle of violence that we're in, And I can see that there are these things that I need to change about how I live my personal life, how I parent, how I do marriage, how I do society, and how I think society should, like countries, should operate. And that means we're going to be breaking a whole bunch of stuff that is actually what is causing the continuation of the cycle of violence. It is actually the systems that are causing the cycle of violence, the governments, the rich people, not individual humans. Individual humans have learned all over the world. People stopped doing child marriage. Now, there's religious extremists in every corner of the world that try to keep it here, but humans did learn that lesson, right? We also learned to stop spanking our children all over the world. Jewish thinkers, Muslim thinkers, Buddhist thinkers, all these people were like, oh, actually, based on science, based on, personal anecdotes, based on experience, based on, psychology, all these different studies have shown us that it actually doesn't work for us to hit our children. It does not produce the good that we might have claimed we thought. And it's actually just unregulated adults hurting vulnerable children, right? And we stopped doing that. But what keeps it? The systems, the religious systems, political systems sometimes, governmental systems sometimes, but systems are what keep it. But humans themselves, left to govern themselves, do learn. It is this deeply, 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 deeply indoctrinated belief that humans need to be governed to be good. They need to be controlled to be good. Because if we're left to our own, we're all going to be ratchet and wicked and destroying ourselves. We need to have our legs broken, right? We need to have a shepherd who's going to come in and break our legs, reduce our freedoms, limit our range of motion so that we don't destroy ourselves and the whole flock, right?
And of course, the interpretation is going to come from one particular person who will tell us when we're out of line and need to have our legs broken per the cult dynamic. It may not be Christ. It's going to come from your church leader.
So a statement like the world is getting worse is not benign.
And they do that so often.
Society's going to hell in a handbasket. Teenagers today, this next generation, going down the toilet, right?
I think we could just roll through every single one of our main characters and just look at their social media, and every single post is culture, 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 culture.
Yep.
Save your children. It's
not benign. It is. They say, that's what they say on the top. Culture, 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 teenagers, blah, 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 right? The world, secular society, blah, blah, blah. But what sits under it is this belief that humans left to their own devices will destroy themselves. That's not real. The Epstein class running the world is what's destroying us. Humans are what's happening in Minnesota. The lack of violence from the resistance in Minnesota is the proof that they're lying to us about humanity. And it's atheists, it's Lutherans, it's Anglicans, it's Jews, it's Muslims, it's everything. It's Catholics, it's Protestants, it's all kinds of different people, all kinds of different ethnicities, all as a populist democratic society working together to protect and care for the vulnerable in their community. And no one person is controlling them to do that. No one organization. It's very organic and grassroots and just like a lot of different people. But they want us dependent on them because we're scared of our neighbors. They want us to be scared of ourselves and our neighbors and feel dependent on them and their leadership.
Yeah, if you fear yourself, you're never going to trust that inner voice that's countering the cult's voice, that cult leader up there talking to you, and your voice is saying, but no, I need medication, or no, I think, this feels wrong. And if you've got this other voice chattering up there and you've been told you're bad, so you can't possibly listen to yourself because you're going to betray what this teacher's telling you is good, then you're going to just automatically shut yourself down.
Yeah.
And stop listening to that instinct, which, I mean, as an atheist, I can say that I feel like people generally tend towards trying to be loving and compassionate, and that it does societally get or religiously get beaten out of us. But that's where I land. And I guess maybe I just assumed that was kind of a Christian take and not necessarily a cult or Christian nationalism take, is that I just assumed all Christians thought you were just a bad person. I mean, I was a very devoted Christian. I don't know if it's come across my personality, but everything I give is 110%. It's just too much.
Well, I don't know if this is okay to say, but you okay, so we talked about before, like, most of your friends are Christian. About 50% of my friends are Christian, 50% of my friends are atheist or agnostic or some other religion. But they all feel like Christians to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, there's this unifying, like, belief in the goodness of the human sitting across from you, the value of them, their worthiness for protection and love and affection and empathy and all the things. Like, I don't know what you call it, but I'm not afraid of people who feel like that.
Yeah, I grew up trying so hard to fix myself, to prove to myself, because I was never good enough. And you never, in our particular belief set, you never knew really until you reached the gates of heaven whether or not you were going to get in. And no matter how much you tried or how much you wanted to be, and I couldn't square that. I couldn't. If you couldn't be saved by faith and you couldn't be saved by acts, it was just this arbitrary. You hoped you were thinking the right things when you died. I mean, that was my take when I was little. It was just so cruel. It was just so. And it's no wonder they beat you down as a child until you have nothing left and except fear. And then they offer back, okay, well, here's your out. And no wonder so many people take it and cling to it. Like there is no way to get off that life raft, because if they do, hell. And what have we been taught since the very beginning is the most scary, awful thing in the entire world? Hell.
Right. And I the truth is they never wanted us to grow up. That's why we were never allowed to differentiate. That's why we were never allowed to become ourselves and experiment and, work through personal expression and figure out who we are, because we were never supposed to be adults. Even those of our generation who have been given power are still operating as obedient children. They are still trying to get mommy, daddy, sky daddy's approval, respect. It's like, you think of like the Charlie Kirks, right? Our generation who is, promoting all of this stuff, they're still trying to get the approval of those men in power that trained them. Like, it's still a very childlike. They're very rarely differentiating. I mean, I will give Charlie Kirk credit on the Israel thing. Like, he did differentiate, and it cost him his life. Conspiracy theory or whatever, but I think it's pretty. Anyway, can I say that? I don't know if I can say that.
I have my own conspiracy theory. I think it was because the Epstein files were being released. So we all have our own tinfoil hat theories. I think
it's both. Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't falling in line.
Right. I think we can say that it's very interesting that the moment he disagreed a little bit about one specific issue, he's no longer here. He no longer has power. And his reputation, his likeness is continuing to be a resource and a weapon that the cult uses to continue the work they wanted him to do.
Right. It seems like they omitted. It's amazing how much they omitted where you or I might not have disagreed with him all that much. I was actually pretty surprised to find out. I was like, oh, well, this is an interesting quote from Charlie Kirk. I wouldn't have expected him to say that. You will never find them quoting that. They will not.
He said a lot of terrible, horrible things.
He's a
And
terrible.
also, the things that he said that weren't terrible and horrible did not get aired. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they just buried those.
Yeah.
Not that I don't think he had
Right.
issues. I hold him still in low regard. But I was surprised when I saw some of those quotes, and I just wondered, where did they bury that? So they took a nuanced person. I mean, he wasn't terribly nuanced, but he did have those moments, and they immediately stripped it and are using it as a propaganda plate for everything that isn't nuanced.
Yeah. Okay, here's another one of the facts under the facts. And this one they do kind of say out loud, to a certain extent. Well, okay, so the belief is that women are less reliable than men. And that God is extra angry at women and they must be controlled extra. Now, this is not just women. They also do this with blackness or people of color of any sort. Or just being foreign, like from a different country, barbaric, backwards,
Dehumanizing them.
Yeah. And so white men are above everybody else. And there's, again, this caste system that kind of like peters out into different ways. Like white women are over black men a lot of times and that kind of stuff. But in order to control a population, you have to have people who do the controlling. And so this is why they raise white boys different than they raise white girls. They raise white girls to obey and submit and be available to make babies and assist their husbands in their call. But they raise boys to control and lead and guide and dictate and control and abuse. And that's not by accident. That goes really, really deep. They genuinely believe women need to be controlled. Like, the whole thing is, Eve was the first one to sin and she led her husband into sin, and women brought evil into the world. Therefore, we can't trust them.
Right.
And then, but what they'll actually say is women are emotional, or women are supposed to be mothers, or, their main job is at home, or whatever it is. Or they'll say things like, well, she's fat, or she's a hoe, right? Like, whatever it is. But under the things they actually say, or let's talk about the racism side of it or the foreign side of it, right? Like, that country is backwards and, barbaric and, third world country. They like use these terms that just invalidate anything that person might have to offer. Same with racism. They have this whole freaking nasty theology of the sin of Ham and how blackness originated as a result of disobedience and going against authority of the father and being disrespectful. And Mormons have their own version of it where they, the boat full of white, I think, Jews who came to America, but then two of them rebelled, and that's where blackness came in. Like, they have their own version of it. And so it invalidates anything that person might say, a person with more melanin might say about anything. They no longer get a voice at the table. Their experience isn't recognized. It's called dehumanization. But like, we use that term so much. What we mean is what you think and feel is invalid. The only reality is what white, able-bodied, Christian, rich men experience.
One of the most interesting followers we have on Sons of Patriarchy, mostly because she is so vociferous as well as judgmental. So last summer, Peter had to step away for a little while just to deal with some family stuff. And it came out that I actually own the podcast, and I always have been the primary owner. And this woman, and it was, I think, 4 hours. I counted the actual hours between her comments. In one comment thread, she was condemning Peter up and down for his behavior, for not being Christian enough, all sorts of horrific things that she was saying about him. Then when we said, okay, we're going to take a break because we need to figure out what we're doing for our survivors and how we're going to handle this situation. And by the way, we do actually have the big criticism we were hearing was that there weren't women involved in the project and that was all male voice, and that was causing a lot of problems. And by the way, predominantly the staff is female, predominantly the team is female, and this is a female-owned podcast. The amount of hate was unbelievable. I mean, 500 comments of just the sexism and the hatred for me without even knowing who I was. Didn't even matter if I was an atheist or not. These people were just angry there was a woman. Same woman then comments. The only thing this podcast had going for it was an upstanding male leader. And if you have that feeling about women, please sit down and keep your mouth closed. Or change, become a leader, become the strong woman that you think that you are, and serve with us. But it was just hilarious because within 4 hours, it was an instantaneous change. And I wonder if she's even thought about that. I wonder if she's even seen that flip. Does she know that she was throwing a man under the bus, but as soon as a woman came on board, all of a sudden, the bad man was not as bad as, at least he's not female. And so we see that constantly. We fight that every day in our comments. And it's pretty shocking to be a subhuman. I can't imagine also having a race issue. Right. I mean, it's bad enough being atheist. It's bad enough being female. It's bad enough not having children. I cannot imagine adding anything more to my plate. And the race issue and to have it get boiled down to, well, it's cultural.
Yeah.
It's not cultural. It's literally the color of their skin. Stop pretending.
Right. I really like that term subhuman, and maybe this is just a me thing, but I feel like the term dehumanize has just been used so much that I don't see it meaning things to people anymore. Like, it doesn't pack a punch for what we actually mean, which is, like literally making people subhuman. In other words, not only do they not get a voice, they don't get rights, they don't get protections, they literally do not matter when we think about how we're going to operate, govern, interact, And okay, so I want to give credibility to what you're saying, because there is in the Christian Reconstructionist movement, which is part of what Doug Wilson is part of, the CREC is part of, and has also religiously colonized much of republicanism and evangelicalism. One of the three founders, Greg Bahnsen, spent a lot of time talking about apologetics. And before he started his work, the premier Christian apologist was Josh McDowell. He wrote this book called Evidence Demands a Verdict, and essentially he brought forward scientific claims and historical claims to prove the existence of God. Okay? Now, you have whatever kind of feelings you want to have about that book and about Josh McDowell, but at the very least, what I have come to respect about it is he was dealing in reality, hey, we can agree that these things happened historically. We can see that these things happen in nature. We can look at the science. Based on all of these things that we can agree on, let me talk to you about God, right? Greg Bahnsen calls that sin. He says that to use human reasoning, history, science, nature, conscience, to know anything is to set humans up as judges over God, that it is itself idolatry. They call it humanism, and it is humanism, and they act like humanism.
When I say
What?
Oh, I was just wondering. I wonder why people get so mad when I say I'm a humanist. I'm like, wait, aren't we all
Oh,
humanists?
being a humanist is actually the worst thing to a Christian
Oh,
nationalist.
so atheist, female, no kids, and humanist, and a cat person. Got it. I am
Right.
doomed.
Humanism is the belief that humans can work together and can find enough goodness to operate despite their differences to like learn true things and work towards the common good.
Yes, that is
And
my understanding of the definition. That's horrible.
Christian nationalism, because of those things I already listed, if humans are bad, if they must be controlled, if they cannot work together, if they cannot learn, if they're heading for hell in a handbasket, humanism is the lie that sends people to hell because it makes them think they aren't reliant on this super intense religious structure. And so what he brought forward was what they call presuppositional apologetics. Do you remember that term?
Yes.
So presuppositional apologetics is essentially circular reasoning. It says we cannot use any sort of general revelation or things that everyone agrees with, history, nature, science, conscience. We have to just start with the Bible to prove the Bible's existence. We have to start with a belief that God exists to prove God's existence. And so here's the part where they make atheists subhuman. If you, as a Christian nationalist, interact with an atheist on their terms, okay, so starting with what they know and agree with, history, science, nature, conscience, you are actually sinning because you are giving credibility to a lie. And one of the big lies about that Christian nationalism pushes is that the lost, those who don't believe in Jesus, are not just people hurting and in need of compassion and like healing and liberation. They are actually enemies, blatant enemies of God. Like they take that verse from Romans that says that we are all without an excuse, and they say, Sarah, you hate God, and there's
I get told that a lot.
Yeah, you hate God, and because of that, you are actually a tool and a child and a weapon of the enemy, of Satan. You are actually evil, and if I interact with you as if you have something good to say, I am actually giving Satan credibility. So
A few things, a few conversations I've had.
it's evil. It's demonic. It's not at all. Again, speaking as a Christian, that's not at all how Jesus interacted with anybody. Okay?
Yeah, that is redeeming.
Okay? This is not Christian. Well, I mean, it might be Christianity, but it's not Jesus.
Right.
Okay? Unfortunately, I think it is Christianity. I think that's what Christianity has become. But that's not what Jesus did. That's not what we are being called to as followers of Christ. And this idea that to interact with someone of a different belief system respectfully and with humility and giving them dignity and listening to them as if they have something valuable to say and empathetically is sin. That's why democracy will never work and populism will never work while those sorts of beliefs exist. And that's why you see Charlie Kirk types show up to vulnerable 18-year-olds and not listen to them and just belligerently argue them down. And that's why arguing facts with people coming out of cults won't work.
Yeah.
Because they've been trained to not interact on a factual level with anyone who's different. The only thing that gets under the programming is empathy, is love, is compassion, which they say is sin.
Yeah, which they've really taken. I mean, it explains so much about Rigney and so much about their approach to feminists, humanists, empathy, all these ideas
CRT.
And supporting people, socialism. It explains why they're attacking it all. If you can undermine all of that, then you have the control and you're the one holding these people hostage, and they can't get help.
Why do they have apologetics or worldview classes every semester in classical Christian schools, in homeschool, in Christian seminaries and Bible colleges? Why? Because they have to keep that programming up high to essentially delete everyone that disagrees with them. That's what it does. Yeah. It deletes.
It's really easy to, it's, again, kind of tying back. I know we said that it would be okay to be relational on this episode. And I think this will probably be something that our listeners are going to experience throughout our podcast, is that I've been living, and I know you've been living this life, but again, kind of a different dynamic. It seems like you're able to give a framework and I'm able to give experience. But I will interact as Sons of Patriarchy, the admin, and I'll get conversation back and forth. The instant I say something could be the same exact thing. I've just immediately shut down. Well, you hate Christians. If I hated Christians, I wouldn't give y'all the time of day. I have spent my entire life wasted trying to stop this, trying to care and love Christians. People out.
Yeah.
So if I hated Christians, I wouldn't be here. If I hated God, I also wouldn't be here. I don't hate God. I just have a different opinion about what that encompasses. I don't really care. It's just, but it's an immediate shutdown, and it is so discouraging because you cannot have, like you said, and the internet's made this especially difficult because they are able to just shut down. They can block you, they can tune you out, they can skip that comment.
The algorithm will do it for them a lot of times.
Yeah, and so you just disappear, and there is dead silence. I don't think Gabe Wrench has had the courage to respond to a single comment I've ever made to him, despite being usually about politics, which he should be able to expound upon. But just because I'm a humanist or an atheist, or usually a woman, usually right, and disagreeing with them, it's an instant shutdown.
Yeah.
And and maybe the internet's not the way to reach these people. How do we reach through that? Because I can, in person, I can explain compassion, I can give empathy. But when you're arguing with someone on the internet and first of all, there's your first problem, arguing with someone on the internet. But if we're trying to get information out now, we're here on a podcast, we're having really nuanced discussions. I'm really excited for that. But globally speaking, we're not reaching people the same way anymore. They're not relying on these close connections and these human connections that sustain the belief that we all have intrinsic value.
Right. Man, I have so much I want to say about that. One is I just want to take a moment to, I don't know, I think apologize for how you've been treated. I have my own version of it. I have my own reasons that I've been deleted and dehumanized, but I am still a Christian. And so because of that requires them to give me at least 30 seconds. I have about 30 seconds of humanity, probably. Especially because, I am still married to my husband and, I've got the 4 kids. I do a lot of things the right way, and that gives me some privilege within the system. And it's one thing to be dehumanized individuals. It's another thing to be dehumanized by the people in your life that you love, your family members, the people that you have sacrificed for and grown up with. It's another thing entirely to be at the mercy of an administration that dehumanizes you and seeks to legally remove all of your recourse, all of your rights, all of your privileges, all of your voice, all of your representation. They want to take away your right to vote. Right? They want to take away a lot of people's right to even be here in this country or be here on this planet. I, for a long time now, and I have never said this publicly, but I'm maybe saying it right now. If we do a character study, just like a basic character study, like you would do in any literature class, about the character of God as presented in the Bible. And obviously, there are weird passages that it's like, I don't know what to do with this. This doesn't seem to fit with the rest of the character of God. But like overall, maybe if you just want to start with Jesus, right? You write down a list of like the characteristics that make up Jesus. And then you write down the characteristics that make up the God that MAGA follows, the God that Christian nationalists follow, the God that the Gospel Coalition and the Young Restless Reformed and, evangelicalism in general at this point follows. It's not the same being. It's not the same list. They're actually often, almost exclusively, opposites of each other. And especially now with like the Epstein stuff being released and the stuff that's coming out of there, it's like, this is why I feel really confident saying this at this point. Like, I think that we have exchanged the truth for a lie. I think evangelicalism is serving the opposite of God, the Antichrist.
I wouldn't disagree with you, but I'm not allowed to.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously not allowed to have an opinion about this, Sarah. Yes, you are. I want to hear all of your thoughts. But I mean, that is a lot to wrestle with as a Christian, to realize that my tradition has exchanged following Jesus for serving mammon, money, power, greed, corruption, control, whatever you want to call it. And that's why I have no further loyalty to the church system. I am historically a Christian, but I either call myself an agnostic Christian or a humanist Christian, because I don't know how else to differentiate that. Like, what that is has nothing to do with what I believe I'm called to as a Jesus follower. And I also want to give a lot of space for people to not know how to interact with Christians, even like Christians who are good and kind and maybe on the right side of things. Like, that label Christian has come to mean such awful, horrible, painful, personally painful things. They've systematically erased everyone that's not them.
And we're seeing, just a surge in the insistence that that's a good thing. I kind of want to back them up a little bit. Again, facts are not helpful. I understand that. But I want to ask them, when has a state-sponsored religion of any kind, any particular sect of Christianity, pick one, we can look at history. It has never been a good thing for you guys. Just base level, choosing to make the United States a Christian nation. One, what does that mean to you? How many of our listeners right now agree with Doug Wilson? How many of our listeners think that Doug Wilson should be able to call women vulgar, despicable things and then laugh about it? How many of them think it's okay to defend slavery? How many of them think it's okay to protect pedophiles and raise them up in your church, give them more power? How many of them think it's okay to indoctrinate via homeschooling material? Probably not a whole lot if you ask them really, really straightforward. Do you agree with this statement? But you know what they're electing? They're electing Hegseths. They're electing the CREC. They're bringing Doug Wilson to power. And if you want a state-sponsored religion, you need to be prepared for whatever you've brought into being. And it may not be your state-sponsored religion. It may not be your Christianity. In fact, likely, if you're a decent Christian, it's not going to be your Christianity. And so I get an argument with several of my family members all the time who think I'm really hard on Christians. And it's because you, not necessarily you, but you as Christians are responsible for your behavior and for your label. Christ did not want this. I'm pretty positive. And from an outside perspective, where I'm not stuck in your little weird truth bubble, and can have read the Bible and have interacted with Christians for a long time, I feel very confident in saying that.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how Christians can shrug off the responsibility of how evil Christianity has become while saying, but we're still going to make it better. Make it better now, and then come back to the system, or don't.
Right. I think,
because right now it's a cult. It is not Christianity, or Christianity has become a cult. The modern American evangelical is participating in some kind of cult, whether it be political or religious.
And I don't want to let the mainliners off the hook either, because 50% of them are complicit in everything as well.
I'm not letting them off the line at all. If you are a Christian, your duty is to fix your religion.
Absolutely.
If you're a mainliner Christian who just loves Jesus, it is your duty to be here. It should not be me on a podcast complaining about how racist and sexist and violent this is. It is not my job to police you. It is not my job to protect your children. And here we are.
And yeah, this is exactly the work that I feel called to do, is like constantly hold a mirror up to Christians and be like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And the thing that's been so freaking crazy to me all along is, the Bible throughout it is like, use wisdom, be careful, like, be a Berean, like, there was false teachers, and the apostles were like disagreeing about things and getting caught up in heresies themselves. Like, we think we're better than all of them and we're above reproach.
They don't even agree with each other. They don't even agree with each other. So how can you possibly think that, again, back to that state-sponsored religion, who are you going to actually elect as your
Well, and that's part of it, is like, it's gotten so bad that at this point, all of the things that I would point to as reasons that state-sponsored religion have always been bad, they're freaking walking around with crusader crosses. They're wanting to bring back the Inquisition. They just think the wrong people did it.
Yeah, that probably has been the most terrifying. I mean, some of the things that have come out of William Wolfe, and I will admit, when, not to be too political, we should pause again.
I think it's too late for that.
We're done. But when Renee Good got shot, regardless of how you feel about the situation, it was obviously complex, and from a legal standpoint and from a lot of different standpoints. But there was a moment inside me where I went, being a white woman is no longer, it was bad. It was already bad. We experienced difficulties. We've talked about being subhuman in the hierarchy, but we were at least, white. And then all of a sudden it was, you don't even have to be an agitator. You could have your lab in the car and still be killed for disagreeing with the status quo, the system, or however they want to frame it. That was what I took away. It was all of a sudden this privilege that I had, which was barely clutching onto the bottom of the pyramid of this male power structure, was suddenly just gone.
Yeah.
And I'm still more privileged than the average person. But I had to sit with that for several hours, and it was absolute horror of, this is the level at which they are now taking out the subhuman, and just eliminating them so that we can just keep bringing the power up higher.
Stephen Miller wants to reduce the population by 100,000. He doesn't really care how. He just wants it to happen.
Yeah. Well, and at the same time, they're preaching more white babies need to be born. So we know how.
When Renee Good was shot, my experience of that was, now things are going to change.
Yeah. Yeah.
The moment white women were such a huge cohort, lost our privilege, all of a sudden there would be a lot of us who would take to the streets and fight for what we should have been fighting for our neighbors all along. And, Black and brown men and women have been saying it for decades, that there was actually no protection for poor white folks, for women, that they were being used by the system, and, all of the things. And that nothing was going to change until white women started feeling how little privilege and protection they had within the system. And so the moment she was shot, it was like the sinking feeling of like, and now it changes, but like kind of for the worst reasons. Like that's just another thing to sit with in my, cornucopia of identities, is being a white woman and what that means in the system, and, the ways I want to be better and different than what we're programmed to be.
Yeah, even without the Christian label, it still is something to grapple with. Something that I have to also be mindful of is how I show up and what I give. But I can say with certainty that it is not a kind world, and it doesn't make sense to me that people would equate that with Jesus. And it just seems like the evangelical Christian world has really gone off on this tangent where they can say all they want, that the founding fathers this, the founding fathers that. The founding fathers did not intend for this to happen.
They also didn't intend for what we want to happen either.
Well, that's an obvious one, but
yeah, but I think both have to be said, because I think that part of how we got to where we are is because the left also bought into the mythology, right? That the founders were like perfect, and that this country was founded on like perfect, beautiful values. And it really was about equality, and it really was about freedom for all. And it's like, no, baby girl, it wasn't.
Yes. Yeah, we're seeing that played out now on a national scale, where it really is the elite versus everybody else. And I don't buy into the whole money corrupts all people. I've seen some incredibly
Power
good
corrupts.
Power does seem to corrupt. And I mean, I haven't seen it disproven yet that power just in some way, even if it's tangential, has corrupted humanity. And that maybe that's where cult leaders really start to turn, is they go from being a charismatic pastor to, because I don't know, have you watched a lot of cult docuseries?
Oh yeah.
A lot of them don't really start off as much. You're like, oh, okay. I mean, like, let's go Keith Raniere. What a weirdo.
Yeah.
Didn't start off as anything. And then all of a sudden he was this power hungry, incredibly connected, incredibly like Epstein level in. And I don't think that that's where he started off as. I don't think Doug started off in God's garage going, I'm going to be some megalomaniac attached to the president well, frankly, Doug might think that. But
he did think that. I can tell you that for sure. That.
But did we think that he was going to do that? No, because you're just some little pastor in Idaho.
Yeah, and he definitely thought that it was going to be one of his people who would be president when he got here, not Trump. And he calls them the clown town. He doesn't respect them, but he knows that he can use them and leverage them, and it's a whole thing. The last distinctive, like when I was talking about the facts under the facts, the last one that I want to bring up today, there's more, but there's one more that I want to hit today. And that is that if you don't rule over others, they will rule over you.
That's a really good.
So if you live as Jesus did, and like live at peace with all men and turn the other cheek, and, you're not out trying to like make sure that you get enough so that, you hoard resources, because if you don't, there won't be enough for you, right? If you live in that way, they call that foolishness, They believe that Jesus is foolish. They hate Jesus. They hate empathy. They hate compassion. They believe empathy is a sin. That if you live at peace with all people, you are essentially signing up to be prey. And this is where the Make America Great Again, preemptive strike, we need to be the strongest military power in the world. We need to give all of our money to defense and not to, existing, and education and all the things, healthcare. It's this deeply held belief that if I don't gain control and power, I will be controlled and oppressed. And it's this fear that is baked into the nervous system of Christian nationalists that drives everything that they do. That's why, we have to go after all the immigrants, because if we let them become more numerous than us, it's Exodus all over again, right? If we let them become more numerous than us, they'll rise up and overpower us. It's a tale as old as time, but it is now rubber stamped by an administration and paid for by the most wealthy people in the world. And it's, in connection with other rich people and other politicians and corrupt governments in other places in the world, that are trying to position themselves as safe. And if you follow them, you get to be safe because they're the richest and the most powerful and no one can beat them up. And if you were to just enjoy those riches and power and privilege that you have and not continue to exert force over others, someone will become stronger than you and destroy you.
Yeah, so that, everything you've mentioned has some element of fear baked into it. And that constant hypervigilance and that constant fear feeding from childhood is going to keep you...
You're talking about people who statistically have like a 6th grade education. They don't know world history. They don't know about cultures around the world. They don't know other languages. They haven't met people outside of their, political religious bubble.
And if they have, it's very controlled.
Yeah, right. And if they have, they were told to treat them as subhuman and not actually listen to them and learn anything from them, right? And so that doesn't absolve them of any accountability, but it does demonstrate why the fear tactics work. I think it's okay, so tinfoil hat moment, like why hate the public school system so much? Because historically, Christians were the starters of public schools. Christians were often the ones who were making sure that we had an educated populace, because then they could think for themselves. And generally speaking, when people think for themselves, they end up living well in a populist society, right? So why this attack on public schools? Well, I think it's because the fear tactics work better the less information you're armed with. And so you can control people and you can isolate them and you can indoctrinate them.
There's no challenge to the belief system. If everyone in your little puddle believes the same exact thing as you do, then if you never jump outside that puddle, you're not even going to know.
And this is why we especially disenfranchise urban, Black, Hispanic, refugee type schools, because we definitely don't want them to be educated. We don't want them to be competing with, this is the whole DEI stuff, right? We don't want other people competing for jobs with us, competing in the marketplace with us, competing with us in the marketplace of ideas.
Yeah, it's
also why we hate welfare. We don't want them to be human. We don't want them to be here. We don't want them to be another voice we have to interact with and collaborate with. Same with healthcare. We don't want disabled or chronically ill people to be people we have to, help or
I imagine
listen to.
Empathy and compassion are not just switches. You can't just turn it on and off. So once you open up that drip line And you take that moment where you've met someone that's chronically ill, or you've met someone that's on welfare, and you care and love about them, and you get to learn about their experiences, you're going to start asking, well, what about the rest? And instead of just writing them off as all lazy or milking the system, you're going to start going, but I know someone who isn't and needs that help. And I think the biggest power we have is continuing that discourse of letting them find more. Because if they can find just one exception, then the cult goes, oh, there's your exception. Here's our, in Christchurch, it's the token Black family. And because we live in such a white populated area, it's very difficult to find anyone of color here. And Christchurch especially, given their position, there's very few people of color. And so they very carefully have selected, Black families who fall under acceptable governance and are acceptable within the church, but they're still not treated the same. Or they're treated as some absurdity, something to be looked at, examined, and used as an example, instead of just integrating and meeting them where they're at, meeting them with compassion and empathy. And I've got to figure that if you let that gate open, that it would never close again.
Yeah, I mean, this is 100%. This is where the sin of empathy comes in thing. And I think we should do a whole episode on that. I know I keep saying that, but there's so much to say.
5-parter. So.
Yeah, because the first person you have to dehumanize is yourself. The first person you can't empathize with is yourself. This is, again, those thought-stopping techniques we talked about. Oh, I'm just being ungrateful. Oh, I'm just being bitter. Oh, I'm just complaining. Oh, I'm just whatever. And then what that does, if you're doing that to yourself all the time, and then you have someone like you or I who's like, wait, I have needs. Wait, I was hurt. Wait, I have feelings. What actually happens inside the person who's been dehumanizing themselves is jealousy. How dare she? What gives her the right to give vent to her feelings? I don't give vent to my feelings. Why does she get to have it and I don't? I mean, this is what happens between parents and children all the time. When your children have a better reality than you had, it becomes oftentimes this very triggering thing that you get angry at your children for having what you never had. Your children have freedom, safety, privileges, affection, freedom that you never had. And there's an inner child in there that freaks out because they needed that and they didn't get that. And so then it becomes this like man versus man battle that is like not the point. The point was this person abused that person, and that's the conversation we're supposed to be having. But instead, we're having this nervous system reaction of how dare she? What gives her the right? None of us are letting ourselves have that. She's taking up too much space.
Yeah.
And that's the conversation. And and that's the conversation because everyone feels the same pain. It's just some people are not allowing themselves to empathize with their own experience and give themselves self-compassion. Jesus tells us that we have to love others as we love ourselves. We cannot love others unless we love ourselves. And that is the very thing Christian nationalism will never genuinely let you have. No matter how much Bovino or Trump says, I love you, that's not what it's about.
So I guess maybe kind of as a closing question, which is probably a really big question. As an atheist, I've always felt that Christianity itself lent, and again, maybe it's just the way I was raised, and I'm starting to kind of think about this in a different way, but that loving yourself was not, they would say that you were supposed to love yourself, but you weren't actually supposed to love yourself. You're still supposed to hate yourself. And that was just my experience with Christianity. I didn't even know that you could be a Christian and love yourself as a person.
Yeah. I think that's because I mean, I don't know. It's just pervasive. The worm theology, the hating yourself, the self-flagellation, the trying to, this is why in Christianity, we have, for those who really want to follow Jesus, the gospel matters. The fact that it is a free gift given to all just as you are. There's nothing you have to do to perfect yourself or to work for it or to earn it, matters. And the moment we start adding crap to that, we end up here. You end up with not loving yourself, and therefore you can't love other people, and therefore you can't behave like Jesus. So, I mean, I think a lot of people will be confused by the idea that Christians are actually supposed to take really good care of themselves and love themselves. And I could spend a whole time talking about that too, but I mean, I think that's enough for right now.
I think Jesus exemplified that. I mean, everywhere he went, he cared for others.
He had boundaries. He left the crowds that needed him. He left people who were in need and hurting to go rest as like this God-human thing, right? Like, if he needs rest, how much more so do like little old me need rest, and need boundaries and can't take care of everybody and do everything and save the world. That's the point of the gospel, is that Jesus already did. And like, yes, we're supposed to absolutely partner with him in that, participate in that work of healing and redemption and liberation, but not as the Messiah, not as the Savior, not as the person that everyone is dependent on, but as humans who are frail and needy and have limitations and feelings and traumas and blah, 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 blah.
So maybe when we get back next week, let's talk about relying on other people and what it means to connect with peer supports and advocates and what the differences are. Because I think that you and I have both said pretty abundantly that I'm not an advocate, you're not an expert, but we're here in this space. So we've claimed some space for ourselves. And what does that mean? Because I really think that it's important to arm people with the knowledge of where you're going and who you're going to talk to and what it could mean, because everyone has their own flavor of getting out. So maybe that's something we talk about next week.
I like that.
Okay. Well, it was really good to catch up with you. Thanks again, Margaret.
You too. Talk to you later.